Welcome back to Murder with Friends. Today we're talking about the case of Casey Anthony in the murder of her daughter, Caylee Anthony. Where you're picking up with us right now, we're gonna be breaking down the evidence, but before we can get into the key pieces of evidence that were entered, let's talk about how she was arrested and put behind bars, because this was a little bit of a loop-de-loop in and of itself.
Okay, so she finally, Caylee's reported missing by Cindy, the grandmother of Caylee. Casey is, she's brought in for questioning. The detectives go over a series of stories where Casey claims that she had last been seen with her babysitter, Zenaida Gonzalez, Zanny the nanny. Casey points out to the apartment in which Zenaida lived. There's no one lives in that apartment. It's completely empty. Casey also claims that she works at Universal Studios. The detective, Yuri Melvich, in the case, obviously calls Universal, finds out Casey had never worked there, but decided to, or had worked there like 2 years prior, I should say, and decides to bring the next day, we're talking like this is the day after that Caylee's reported missing, brings Casey into Universal Studios. Casey puts up this entire ruse, like, oh, I worked here. Oh, this is my supervisor's name. Guy's not in the records. Oh, these are some friends I actually talked to about Caylee's disappearance. They don't work there. Leads her into like the offices of Universal Studios, and eventually they end up in a dead end corner, and Casey confesses, like, I don't work here.
I've been lying to you. It's all been a lie. But they don't get her right away because Caylee is still missing at this point. We're still in July.
Yeah.
They don't know where Caylee is. Casey says she has no idea where Casey is. So how do they get her behind bars where they can start building up a case against her, figuring out what's going on?
So initially she's put behind bars for child neglect, in which she gets out on bond for, and then is arrested a second time for these check fraud charges that Amy Huizinga, her friend, files a police report on. She gets out on bond again, is released in home custody with an ankle bracelet monitor. It wasn't until they find the body of Caylee Anthony that Casey is finally brought up on murder charges, and she's in jail at this point for the next 3 years.
Right, and during this time and during when she was first indicted for check and for child neglect, we do have some really telling phone calls between her and her parents and her brother, and she's very angry. But she insists that Zanny the nanny has her kid and that she doesn't know what's going on, and she goes down a whole bunch of rabbit holes. She continues lying for so long.
She claims like the car was stolen. She claims that she had searched for Caylee.
Right, and she was searching on her own. That's why she didn't want to get law enforcement involved, because you don't know what Zanny's involved with. I was listening to one phone call where she says she's got people in North Carolina, like of course they can't find her because they're looking in Florida. If they would just listen to me and they looked in North Carolina. There is a person named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. She does exist, and her life was actually really put into a tailspin for a time during this case, because she had to come forward in front of the media and say, hey, I had nothing to do with this.
Wasn't
but
me.
For a time, she was a suspect.
She was, and the way the media latched onto her and played that out ruined this woman's life for a period of time. And I know she ended up suing for defamation, which was eventually tossed out. But I feel she had every right to, because the way that played out was, it's like, the name Zenaida Gonzalez, and the fact that she lived in Kissimmee, which is different, like it's about 40 minutes away from where the Anthonys lived. She didn't have any other thing. She wasn't a young, half Jamaican woman. She was a middle-aged, Latin American woman. And it was just, none of it checked out. And it was, I understand the police were looking for every shred of evidence at this point, but because Florida has very open, police case logs, like the moment, a jailhouse conversation takes place, essentially the Florida media can have access to it.
It's all recorded.
Yeah, it's all recorded and it's all open public.
And that would play a big part into the evidence, and that's where we are going to start looking into right now, because there were so many pieces of evidence against Casey Anthony, and I want to hear from you guys in the comment section below about what piece of evidence maybe stuck out to you. What do you think was the smoking gun in this case? And Meredith and I are going to present our pieces of evidence that really put it together for me. And for me, there is the duct tape that was found on Caylee Anthony's mouth, on the skull of Caylee Anthony, because when her body was discovered December 11th, and then when it was confirmed to be the skeletal remains of Caylee Anthony December 19th, there was duct tape there. It was really hard to figure out exactly, what happened to this little girl, but they could discern that there was duct tape and that she was in a trash bag, and all of that has always not sat well to me. So let's go to a clip right now of the duct tape as an indicator that Caylee was murdered.
The evidence in this case will establish that there is no other reason for the placement of multiple pieces of duct tape on this child's face, mouth, and nose, other than the specific intent to end that child's life.
The duct tape somewhere located on the lower half of this face. There is no child that should have duct tape on its face when it dies. There is no reason to put duct tape on the face after they die. Based on our experience, we've seen that in cases of homicide.
Same tape that was found on Caylee's body was also found on a gas can taken from her home.
So that to me is the piece of evidence that I think proves that Caylee Anthony was murdered, and that there is a correlation between her murder and the Anthony home. And I think that within that Anthony home, the only person who had means and motive that we can show is Casey Anthony. And I present that as the piece of evidence that really stuck out to me, because when we talk about the trial in part 3, the defense presented an alternative theory that was Caylee wasn't murdered. She died in an accident. Now, I don't think that that adds up with the way that the body was found.
Well, and also remember the gas cans. Casey her father accused her of stealing gas cans because Casey and Tony Lazzaro broke into the Anthony home at some point after the car had run out of gas to steal gas cans. And so you have these gas cans that the only duct tape exists on Caylee's remains and on this gas can. The roll of duct tape's gone. You know, and it's you can't explain that,
right?
But they should have.
They should have. So for you, what is a piece of evidence that you really want to address?
So, okay, we talk about the trash. We talk about the car. So initially when Cindy calls, she says that it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car. Cindy actually ends up and changes her statement.
Oh,
she does it several times.
Cindy Anthony, she's good for a lie.
But on the stand, she ends up, I do not believe it was rotting flesh. When asked further, do you believe it was rotting garbage? She replies, yes. And she goes on to say how it was a pizza box that had been sitting in the car for 19 days. And that's what caused the smell of rotting flesh. And there is trash that
let's actually take a look. We have some photos of this trash.
Yeah, so this is the trash that was pulled out of the Pontiac Sunfire. The police had put it out in what's called a drying room because it was wet.
Well, because initially it had been thrown away. When they found the garbage in the back of the car, at that point, they don't know that they're looking, that there's a murder case that's on the cusp of happening, that's about to land in their family's front door. So they throw the garbage away, like, oh, it smells really bad, let's throw away this garbage. Then when the police have to go back and search for it,
they find it. And at this point, the trash had already had maggots in it. Which, don't get me wrong, maggots are a huge thing in a very swampy area like Central Florida. You can get maggots pretty easily, but for maggots to exist in the trash can or in a car, that's gonna attract a lot of type of bugs that bring in the maggots. So you find this. Then, so fast forward to December when they find Caylee's remains, they also find her wrapped in 2 trash bags and a laundry bag. Laundry bag that the sister of the laundry bag is at the home. So we have this now the trash bags, I will say, it was a white plastic trash bags and they were black trash bags that they found with Caylee's remains. But you have this whole theory of trash, and as several experts in the field, including the person who managed the tow truck company that pulled the car and Cindy's own initial police call, they say it smells like a dead body. Yeah. You can't. There's rotting trash, and I have smelled several dead bodies. You know what that smell is. You might not, if you've never dealt with a dead body, you might not instinctively feel that that's a dead body smell, but you know there's a huge difference between even going to a landfill and a dead body. It is a very hits you in the face. It smells like rotting human flesh is just something that I cannot compare that smell to anything else in the world. And the fact that George suspected it, and George would know. You know, I don't know his exact history in the law enforcement, but you think a cop might come upon a dead body or two. I think he might have an idea.
Yeah.
You know, and the way that Cindy just twisted her story to end up protecting Caylee, I wonder why more analysis wasn't put in that trash and necessarily what they found. Like, they ended up finding the same type of maggots on the near the scene. Now again, maggots common in Florida, but what they didn't do is they didn't run a gut check of the maggots. They, you know, while they tested Caylee's remains, they didn't bother to check either the maggots found in the trash or the maggots found on the scene for human decomposition. And that was something that if they had done that, it really would have helped cinch the deal for the prosecution.
Yeah, that seems like a major oversight, because a lot of the forensic evidence that we will get into in part 3 that was presented at trial, unfortunately, the defense was able to poke very valid holes and present reasonable doubt to the jury. And with that said, we're just gonna jump into part 3. In part 3, we are gonna be telling you about the trial, the verdict that was heard nationwide, and we are gonna be sharing our own theories on what the hell happened to Caylee Anthony. We'll see you then.